Sergio Corbucci's somber 1968 spaghetti western, The Great Silence, has been hailed as a classic by fans of the genre for decades. And while there's much to be said for its superb atmosphere and uncompromising vision, it seems to me the main reason it is fondly remembered is for its downbeat ending and snowy locale. Though it is hardly the first western to be shot in a frosty region, The Great Silence has become the definitive winter western to a great many audiences. And now, it's time to stop talking about it. Instead, what of the other snowbound spaghetti western? One that was released the same year, months prior to The Great Silence.
The man.
Cuánto costa morire? Translation, how much does it cost to die? Also known as Taste of Death and Cost of Dying. Filmed on location at the National Abruzzo Park, just east of Rome, Cost of Dying begins with an outlaw gang led by the sadistic Scaife murdering cowboys on a herd run and rustling their cattle. The harsh weather keeps them from advancing on the trail, leading them to find shelter in a nearby town made up of farmers. The outlaws quickly make themselves a danger to the populace, and the sheriff tries to rally the townsmen to do something about it. But at the moment of truth, they prove cowards, and their sheriff is made to face Scaife alone, a clear reference to High Noon. And while Gary Cooper is triumphant in the American classic, the sheriff in Cost of Dying is shot down on the street, and the townspeople are forced to watch as he dies.
You're dying for them. They don't understand why.
The rustlers take the town hostage, forcing them into labor and taking their women for sexual partners. One young man named Tony, whom the sheriff was a father figure for, takes the initiative and escapes, vowing vengeance on the rustlers. Scaife's right-hand man, the only sympathetic member of the group, Dan L., played by John Ireland, goes looking for the boy, finds him, and agrees to help him stop his fellow marauders, which leads into a Rocky-like montage training sequence. Because of its snowy setting, Cost of Dying is unjustly compared to The Great Silence, when in fact, Cost of Dying has more in common with an unsung American Western from 1959 titled Day of the Outlaw, about a group of bank robbers who take over a town in the dead of winter. Indeed, in a genre known for its style over substance, Cost of Dying stands out from the pack of Italian productions at the time. Much like its American ancestors, it focuses on a complex and character-driven story about a man who lost himself in the empty pursuit of revenge, and is eventually given the opportunity of redemption when he comes across his estranged and troubled son, who is himself consumed by hate, harboring vendetta against Scaife for the murder of the man who raised him, the town sheriff. Ireland's character teaches him to channel that energy into defending the town and its people, a group that, initially, the boy has nothing but disdain for after they prove too cowardly to stop the murder of the sheriff, despite their superior numbers. Eventually, Ireland's message gets through, and the boy convinces his fellow partisans to revolt against the rustlers. To Cost of Dying, personal vendetta, no matter how justified it may seem, is just an evil act stacked upon a previous evil act. This message is atypical for a category of film type with more simple and oftentimes lunk-headed Jacobean plays than perhaps any other genre. The opening cattle drive appears to be further influenced from American westerns, as spaghetti westerns involving droving are very rare. The inclusion of John Ireland as a lead solidifies this, as he had a supporting role in one of the great cattle drive movies of all time, Red River. It is a pity, then, that the film falls back on tired spaghetti western tropes for its final moments, aping Leone's style for the obligatory showdown. And yes, like The Great Silence, Cost of Dying does have a downer ending, although not as extreme. John Ireland is one of the many American actors who were wooed to Italy in the 1960s by industrious Italian producers waving fat paychecks. Unlike most of his peers, who starred or appeared in one or two spaghetti westerns, Ireland managed 10, packing in a total of 9 within 3 years, then returning to Italy in 1974 for his 10th and final. Like in Cost of Dying, he played aged heroes normally partnered with a younger foil, but he also managed to fit some villain roles in there as well. Italian pop singer and actor Andrea Giordana only starred in 3 spaghetti westerns as lead, the first being The Dirty Outlaws, a film that rivals Corbucci's liberal use of mud in his seminal Django. The second is Johnny Hamlet, like its namesake, a spaghetti western version of Shakespeare's Hamlet, developed by Corbucci and originally meant as a vehicle for Anthony Perkins. Johnny Hamlet's score was composed by Francesco De Masi, the same man who scored Cost of Dying around the same time, which can account for why both films' respective main themes have similar titles, even if they sound hardly alike. Cost of Dying would be Andrea Giordano's final western before diving into the world of television and virtually staying there for the remainder of his career. It is worth noting that Andrea comes from an industry family. His father, Claudio Gorra, was an actor and director who mostly helmed dramas and comedies, but managed to eke out a western in 1969, Hate is My God, starring his other son, Carlo Giordano. Hate is My God is a bizarre entry worthy of its own focus on spaghetti western deep cuts, if ever I'm able to find a decent copy. The other spaghetti western Gorra has a connection to, this time as actor, is John the Bastard, a curious take on the Don Juan legend. Incidentally, also worth discussing. Bruno Corazzari was a character actor in Italy. Due to his looks, he would be typecast in villainous roles, but always second banana, or third, or fourth, to the main heavy. Cost of Dying is one of the few times he was allowed a main antagonist role, and he shines with an understated performance, only giving menacing soliloquies when appropriate.
You're no longer men for me. You're only hostages.
As a side note, Corazzari was not only in The Great Silence, but he was the main focus in one of its most memorable moments, the scene in which his bounty hunter character grossly indulges himself with a roast chicken after being paid his blood money. German actress Betsy Bell is given the usual role of a female lead in spaghetti westerns: look pretty and die well. Though the latter never happens, there is no closure to the character at all, as she disappears in the third act, leaving her character's fate on the cutting room floor. If allowed, Bell could have brought more to the role, as, in real life, she was an athlete and an expert marksman. Bell had a short-lived career as an actress. The only other Italian western she appeared in happened to be her final film, 1970's Sartana in the Valley of Death, starring reliable character actor William Berger in a rare protagonist role. As you might have guessed, the film has nothing to do with the official 5 entries of the Sartana series. Sartana in the Valley of Death can best be described as episodic, with Berger meeting a beautiful woman every 20 minutes. Betsy Bell plays the final of these bombshells, singing the film's theme tune and showing some leg. The more interesting female part in Cost of Dying is the lonely village woman who Scaife takes as a comfort girl. Her unfought acceptance of his advances is interesting, and their bizarrely loving relationship humanizes the villainous Scaife. In her final scene, the two strategize about leaving town and leading a life together. Like Betsy Bell's part, this character also gets no closure, as this is the final scene she appears in. The fact that this relationship is not explored further is one of the film's major failings. In defense of this, online evidence suggests the film runs as long as 91 minutes, when the copy being discussed only runs 85, making it entirely possible that the two main female roles actually have closure. Positive story elements to Cost of Dying are how it handles Ireland and Andrea's estranged father-son relationship.
What was he like?
Who? My father.
Familial revelations are often clumsy and over-the-top affairs in spaghetti westerns.
How did you know my mother?
You are my son.
No! No! No!
I am not your mother.
No. It isn't true, is it, Mother? Tell me it isn't true. Tell me.
Cost of Dying plays its reveal closer to the vest, with Ireland's Dan L. never telling the boy who he is. This was the first and only time at bat for director Sergio Merole, whom worked mostly as a production manager on 20 films in his career, which is a shame, as he proved capable of orchestrating a decent imitation of a Hollywood script, and forewent the temptation of the comic book setups and action of his Italian peers. Although he and his director of photography, Benito Frattari, were far from workmanlike, peppering rich visuals wherever they could. I suspect that Cost of Dying is not completely unremembered, though I cannot say for sure. The shadow of its climax looms over the final showdown in 2003's Cold Mountain, the setting and tracking shots almost identical to each other. Possible further evidence is that the late director of Cold Mountain was the son of Italian immigrants. Perhaps he had an interest in the cinema of his parents' home country. More recently, a scene from Django Unchained bears a striking resemblance to the training montage, right down to using a snowman as target practice. Snow would appear in several other Euro westerns throughout this time, often briefly to give the illusion of time passing and long travel. There are only a mere few that remain solely in their snowy locations: Cost of Dying, The Great Silence, and the infamous Cutthroat's 9, a film about a lawman transporting convicts through a mountainous area. Because it is a movie, the cons escape, and all manner of brutality follows. Often considered the most violent Western ever made, it's not. Cutthroat's 9 is suitably unpleasant and scuzzy, but the gore lacks any visceral punch without a well-told story, which Cutthroat's 9 severely lacks. It is exploitation for the sake of it, and you can blame the high school edgelord mentalities of many film journalists for its continued legacy. As for the legacy of Cost of Dying, it will forever be in the shadow of its snowy successor, The Great Silence. But it is definitely worth checking out and inserting into film discussions when talk of snow westerns is on the menu, even if only for The Great Silence's shade to be relieved.
Oh, he's the man who knows what the revenge will do, and bring, it will bring nothing more than pain that